Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wafdulu salatu wa tamu taslim ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa radiyallahu ta'ala ana sadat al-tabi'een wa ulama al-amalin wa a'immat al-arabat al-mujtahideen wa muqalidihim ila yawmiddin amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh once again. Inshallah, I just want to wrap up what we were saying about the poison in the cure, how we have been targeted, we specifically, Islam in general, but specifically black people or black Americans or African Americans, with diluted, contaminated versions of Islam. I mentioned some groups. I mentioned the Qadianis, how they were sent or inspired and promoted by the British. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Isa. We mentioned the Moorish Science Temple, the Nation of Islam, and now we finished off talking about right now the group that is the most pervasive among us, the so-called the Wahhabis, who self-described themselves as Salafis. We mentioned, we didn't really go too much into their history. You have to understand, that at the time they emerged, you had a caliphate, the Ottoman or the Uthmani Khilafate, who basically controlled much of the Muslim world. Not all of it, but much of it. And a lot of times if you go up to World War I, we still had a Khalifa. The Ottomans or the Uthmaniyya. And the Europeans wanted to break that. And it's hard for a lot of us to understand because a lot of times we can't see nothing other than the world in which we live. So, in the world in which we live, America is the big boy. You got Russia. Before them, they were the Soviet Union. And you got China. A lot of you can't picture a world where a Muslim entity is the big boy. And in the early part of the 19th century, even though it was weak and it was crumbling and they lost a lot of territory to the Russians. See, when you look at places like Afghanistan and Chechnya and all of these places, at one time these places were ruled by the Ottomans. But there were a series of wars between the Russians and the Ottomans, and they lost a lot of territory to the Russians. This is before World War I. They lost a lot of territory to the Russians. And so you have these Muslim entities, these Muslim states, now being governed by non-Muslims, when before they were governed by Muslims. And I'm not going to pretend that the Ottomans, everything was hunky-dory and lovely with them, but they were Muslims, right? Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So the Ottomans were getting weak. Now, and then even before the World War One happened, the Ottomans tried to step their game up militarily. And so they enlisted the help of the Germans, Europeans, Germans, to train their military. The Ottomans brought in German contractors to train Muslim military. Very important. Ottomans, before World War One, had a relationship with the Germans. The Germans would train the Ottoman military. Now, they must not have had a clear understanding of white supremacy. White supremacy is a religion. So it's a deen. It has tenets. And just because you see different nations of white people fighting together, don't think that they'll put their differences to the side, that they won't put their differences to the side to fight another non-black nation. They'll forget about all their beef and deal with you and then go back to fighting each other when it's all over with. And so you have these Germans training the Ottomans. World War One gets kicked off. The Ottomans, because of this relationship, side with the Germans. They side with the Germans. So a lot of times when we watch movies or we read some brief history about World War One and World War Two, you have to look at it kind of like you got the big war happening, the stuff they're telling you about, but there's little wars happening under that, which is the real objective. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Was the real objective. So you have the British, the Americans, and all that on one side. Then you got the Germans and all these other people on the other side. The Ottomans, or the Turks, is on the side with the Germans. Meanwhile, the British got relationships with different Arab tribal leaders in the Arabian Peninsula. At this time, there was no such thing as Saudi Arabia. A lot of y'all always refer to the Lawrence of Arabia. It was more than him. That's just what they got on the TV. T.E. Lawrence and all that stuff. It was more than that. They had a whole lot of relationships. They developed a relationship with Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Yes, the same one that your methodology was originally named after, but you changed it to Salafi. The British had a relationship with him. The Saud family, Muhammad ibn Saud, they were like desert stick-up kids, highway robbers. There was an agreement in a relationship formed between the Saud family and the Wahhab family. They intermarried with each other. They intermarried with each other, and they agreed to take over the Arabian Peninsula. And once that was done, the government would fall in the hands of the Saud family, and the Islamic methodology or the scholarship would be the lot, or would fall in the hands of the Wahhab family. You know someone now is descended from Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab if they have the attachment to their name Ali Sheikh, the family of the Sheikh. The Sheikh they're talking about is Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. So if you look up any modern day Saudi Sheikh and he has that attached to his name, he's telling you he's a biological descendant of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his band of Wahhabis, they added, see, up until his time, they didn't have a Trinitarian creed. They had a dual creed. They had Ibn Taymiyyah during his time, he introduced the Tawheed Uluhiyyah and Tawheed Rububiyyah. Then when Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab came, he introduced Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. You know, Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, he comes 700 some odd change years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They didn't teach Tawheed like this. You go to your classical books like the basic ones, the Aqeedah of Imam Tahawi, our Imam, our Shaykh, Imam Amin Muhammad is teaching that book from the period of the Salaf. Everybody talking about Salaf. Well, that's from the period of the Salaf. You don't see this type of weird breakdown of Tawheed. These are later introductions. And as I mentioned before, it was done so that they can justify making takfir on people who did tawassul. Tawassul, praying to Allah by means of an intermediary. And that's a whole nother discussion. But they say that's shirk. And in order for them to justify that, they made these categories of Tawheed in order to be able to say that, okay, you worship Allah with regards to uluhiyyah, but you do shirk as far as rububiyyah. Or vice versa. This is their logic. That's why the categories were created. And as we said later on, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab became with al-Asma wa Sifat. And so that's where you got the Trinitarian Tawheed. And even amongst them, they add other categories. They got Tawheed al-Ittiba', Tawheed of following. They got Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, the oneness of Allah's rulership or governorship. Or sometimes they say Tawheed al-Ibadah. And so they got all these different categories. Point being is that these categories were created for a purpose. To attack the Muslims from within. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. But specifically during the time of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who was refuted by his own brother Sulaiman Abdul Wahhab. Right? So there's this relationship with the British. You got World War I heating up. World War I heats up. The Ottomans get side with the Germans. So you know you got British and all French, all these people on the other side. America on the other side. The British been making these relationships with these different Arab rulers, these tribal leaders. Remember, there was no such thing as Saudi Arabia by the time World War I came around. The Saud family and the Wahhab family, by this time, they're together. They got aspirations of controlling Arabia. The British, they activate one of their coons, that we would call it nowadays, one of their agents, Sharif Hussein. Sharif Hussein stages what they call the Great Arab Revolt. What did he do? He said, these Ottomans, they're oppressing us. I mean, he's with the British too. These Ottomans, these Uthmaniyya, they're oppressing us, the Muslims, the Arabians, the Arabs. And then he does some asabiyya, right? You say we do asabiyya, right? He was doing asabiyya. He said, the Khulafa min Quraysh, he used that hadith. The Khalifa is from the Quraysh. The Ottomans shouldn't be the Khalifas anyway. And they're oppressing us. They're doing this, they're doing that, blah, 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 blah. And they needed him to do it because he claims a descent from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's Sharif. He claims to be a descendant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That holds weight amongst the Muslims. Wahhabis won't tell you that. But, you know, that's another side of the Wahhabi fitna that we got. You know, they downplay the role of the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Deen. So that's another angle, right? This enemy is comprehensive. But in any case, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So Sharif Hussein, he stands up, he makes this proclamation, and so he attacks the supply train at a train. They attacked the supply train of the Ottomans so they couldn't get supplies to. They did it for the British. Ooh, what is this called in Islam? In multiple sense. They call it Khuruj min al-Sulta. You left from obedience to the Sultan or the Khalifa. And not only did they do that, they came out, but they did it for the British. So you got some Arab Muslims working with some European Kafirs to fight Ottoman Muslims. And this was significant. So now at this time, they raised the flag of Arab Asabiyya, and the Ottomans lost control of the Arabian Peninsula. And so as the World War I is continuing and progressing on, the British on that side, they're taking a lot more lands that were previously controlled by the Ottomans. For real, they took the Arabian Peninsula. They just don't say it directly and blunt like that, but they took the Arabian Peninsula. They took Sham, what we call Greater Syria, or the place, or these countries that we now know as like Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and all of these places. They took that. Those countries didn't exist. Those are post-World War I countries, borders. Iraq, they took that. And as a reward for working with the British, they gave Sharif Hussein and some of his sons some of these territories. They gave him Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula. They gave him the country they call Syria. They gave him Iraq. They gave him Jordan too. They gave him Jordan. These countries were created and basically were given to Sharif Hussein and his sons by the British. These countries I named are modern countries. And when this happened, there was a place in Sham, a sliver of land that they didn't give anyone, called Palestine, Philistine. The British were also working with the Zionists. They had different agreements, the Balfour Declaration, all these things. So they had backdoor deals with them that after we get these Muslims to fight against each other, and we get this land, we promise to give you, the European Jews, a place you can call your home. World War I. How did that happen? Again, rewind. Sharif Hussein and the Arabs working with the British against the Ottomans. Sharif Hussein declared himself the king of the Arabs. The British said, no, we don't need none of that. So he got Abdulaziz ibn Saud, I believe it was Ibn Abdulaziz, to attack him and kick him out of the Arabian Peninsula. And so that happened. So now you got Sharif Hussein and his sons controlling at this time Iraq, Syria, and Jordan, and Palestine not being controlled by any Muslim. It was a protectorate of the British. And so, because they're making way for all the European Jews that come from their diaspora or from Poland and all these other places there, right? So now you got the Saud family who had a relationship going back 100 some odd years with the Wahhab family. Now they control Arabia. They tried to take it before, about 100 years before that, and they failed. Muhammad Ali Pasha came from Egypt and kicked them out. Talking about the Wahhabis. So now they control it. They're under the umbrella with the relationship with the Sauds. And they renamed the country Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, just in case you didn't understand anything I just said, was a British colony without the name of it being a British colony. It was a British colony. They just didn't call it that. So Saudi Arabia was created by the British. And that was before they found oil there. So now the Saudis control Jaziratul Arab, the Arabian Peninsula. They renamed it Saudi Arabia. And now their religious doctrine is Wahhabism, because they already had this agreement with the Wahhab family. And then shortly after that, they find oil. And then Aramco is born. The Arab American Oil Company is born. And basically the agreement is, listen, you Arabs, y'all don't know nothing. Y'all don't know how to do anything. Let us Americans come. We'll get the oil out of the ground. We'll bring all of our equipment and everything there. We'll set up shop and we'll break you off some money. Y'all don't have to do anything. We'll do all the work. We'll bring in all the contractors. It'll be our company and all of that. And we'll just break y'all off with this oil. And that was the start of what we're witnessing today. This is why they have all of this money. Because of their relationship with the British and then the Americans. Because of the oil. So now you have the British who basically set up the Saud family and by extension the Wahhab family. And now they got oil there. And so and that's when the Americans came in. So now they have the financial stability to propagate their methodology around the world. So now, just going back through this history, my mind is, these things have so much profound ripple effects that a lot of us don't even appreciate it because we don't even know this history. So, again, what are we talking about? We talked about the Qadiani and their relationship with the British and the rest of the Europeans. Now, we talk about the Wahhabiyah, their relationship with the British and the rest of the Europeans, right? So they fought Islam. They're fighting Islam. Do you think that they're going to promote or allow to be promoted a proper, potent, real, 100% version of Islam without resistance? Of course not. So they always allow and promote this confusion amongst us. Even now, look at it. They like real double faced. I don't see how a lot of y'all can't see this. Like on the one hand, they do good cop and bad cop with everything. They say, oh, this Wahhabism is the sponsor of terrorism all around the world. They have this creed, you know, this Wahhabism or what have, et cetera, right? On one hand, this is one face. This is the non-believers. And they'll identify the so-called the terrorists that we have to worry about. They're Wahhabi in creed. This is what they say, right? But they don't have no problem allowing these same people who they say are Wahhabi in creed to be chaplains all over the prison system. Does that make sense? These people know that they're Wahhabi in creed. Why? We're being targeted. Said, so the Salafi movement go back that far? Exactly. They're Wahhabis. Salafi is Wahhabis. In the mid-90s, they changed their name from Wahhabis to Salafis. They just didn't have the name. Wahhabi equals Salafi. Same thing. There's no difference. They just rebranded or renamed themselves in the mid-1990s. And we talked about that earlier. So, look at these people. They say that the Wahhabis are terrorists. Yet, they allow Wahhabis to be chaplains in the prisons and stuff like this. Why? To make sure that we don't have 100% Islam. So we can be doing this thing, redoing all over again. Another deviant movement that some of y'all don't get. Y'all don't get it. And in the beginning, I just finished reading from their appendix in their noble Quran about how they saying Allah got two hands and all that kind of stuff. In the same breath, they just finished saying that Allah don't resemble His creation. It's double speak. Some of us think Allah has a body. Some of us that regular Muslim, we claim, no, I'm just Muslim. I don't have no sect. I'm not with no Nation of Islam, no Moorish Science Temple, no Ahmadiyya, no none of this stuff, whatever. And some of you are what we call Wahhabi by default. What does that mean? You Wahhabi, you might not even know it because maybe you read some literature like this and it didn't say the word Salafi at all in there. But I learned my Tawheed from this. And it says that basically after saying that Allah is not like His creation, they turn around and say Allah is like His creation because He has two hands. And they quoting verses and they translating it like that. Not translating it according to its meaning. Or you may read Sahih Bukhari, where they refuse to translate Imam Bukhari when he gives what we call figurative interpretation to Allah's attributes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You ever read your English translation of Sahih Bukhari and then you see a whole bunch of Arabic but then don't see no English? And stuff is not being translated? There's a reason why they're not translating it. Because it goes against their corrupt creed, their corrupt aqidah. And you yourself may be like, I'm not getting into all of these things. Yes, but you probably 9 times out of 10, if you black in America, you are Wahhabi by default, even if you say, I'm not Salafi and I don't believe in that stuff. Show me the books on your shelf. Matter of fact, teach me about Aqidah. Teach me about Allah. How are you going to teach it to me? What's the first class? That's going to say it all. They say, but I'm not a Wahhabi, I'm not a Salafi. Okay, the way you just taught me Tawheed, who taught it to you? And who taught it to you? And can we go back all the way to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with this methodology of teaching? Most of us can't answer that question, but I'll answer it for you. No. You can't. Okay, so when did it start? You have to ask yourself the relevant questions. I gave the parable earlier of driving in the wrong direction for a number of hours. When you finally realize you're driving in the wrong direction, most of us, we pull over, we're like, hold on, wait a minute. We look at the GPS, or if you go back before GPS's maps and all that kind of stuff, and at some point, you're going to recognize where you went wrong at, where you made that wrong turn at. Like, I was supposed to make a left, that second left, I made the third left, and okay. And so you backtrack to get yourself back on the right track. And with Islam, we have to do the same thing. We have to do the same thing. And you have to question yourself. If you buy a car, you look at the miles per gallon, who made it. You're looking at the specifications. If you're into smartphones and all that kind of stuff, like most of us are, you're looking at the specs. How many megapixels is the camera? Can I be on Chrome and the Messenger app at the same time? You're looking at all of these specifications to make sure that the phone does what you want it to do. If you go to buy a house, you want to know how old the house is. What was the previous owners? Let me check the foundation. Why? Because you're going to spend all this money for this house. You want to make sure it's not going to crumble on you. Islam? Is Islam more important than my phone? Yeah. Is Islam more important than my car? Yeah. Is Islam more important than my house? Yeah. How much research am I going to look into it to make sure Islam that I got is proper? None. That makes no sense. That only tells you or tells us that our car, our phone, or our house is more important than the deen that we claim to practice. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And some of us, they call it cognitive dissonance. We realize, hey man, this belief I got is wrong. But I've been doing this thing for so long. Friends and family on that belief. It can't be that important. It's just word semantics. And like our shuyukh have told us that Iman, or the science that explains it, Aqidah, Tawheed, Usul, ud-Deen, etc., 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 that's just the root. That's the Usul. That's the foundation. It's the root. Branches, leaves, fruits are the byproduct of the root. So when you start to ask yourself about how and why we are in this situation, don't ignore the root. That's the problem. Get to the root of the problem. The root of the problem, the reason why we have these multitude of other issues, and every individual issue has layers upon layers upon layers. What's the root of the problem? The root of the problem. Faulty belief. And a lot of us, we think that's no big issue. That's not a big issue. That faulty belief leads to something else. It's not all isolated where it just stops where, or belief is just something you have in your head and then that's it. No, it leads to something else. And we have people who learn and teach the Islamic sciences who know better, and they soft shoe around this topic. They ignore it. They downplay it. For a multitude of reasons. And it's really sad. Like, I say, this is deep. Think about it. Let's look at the issue of marriage. You know, it's permissible for a Muslim man to marry a Christian or a Jewish woman. I think most of us know that. What a lot of us don't know is that it's considered a rukhsah, a dispensation, a license, something that shouldn't be normal, but it's allowed. A lot of us don't know that part. We just know that it's permissible. Some of us are even worse. We just so disconnected from the Quran that we think a Muslim man can marry any non-Muslim woman. We don't even restrict it to Christian and Jews. ask a Muslim man is someone who dies during this time and they're not Muslim, what does Allah tell them will be out their end? Are they going to hell? So you believe non-Muslims are going to hell, right? Okay, you're correct. You marry a non-Muslim, a Christian or a Jewish woman. You really love her. Right? Does your love stop in this life? Why don't you articulate that? You know, honey, I love you so much, but you know, you're not Muslim, so you know, when we die, you know, you go your way, hellfire, I go my way. Gender. A lot of us don't think like that. First of all, a lot of us don't really believe that because we wishy-washy in our belief anyway. Because our love is getting in the way of what we really believe. We're reading the Quran, but we got people that we love, friends, family. And so we say, in our mind, we gloss over that. We don't see that. So we have leaders and scholars who say they love us, but go to sleep at night very comfortable, knowing that we believe things that if Allah wills, if Allah don't give us mercy, if Allah don't excuse us, is more than justification to throw us in the hellfire. They cool with that. They ain't saying nothing. Does that person really love you? That's the question. Does that person really love you? That will let you burn in the hellfire, knowing that if Allah keeps His promise and you have that belief and believe that that's where you're going and not say nothing, they know this. They studied it inward and out, up and down, back and front. They know it. But they don't say anything about it. Say it's not that important. We got other issues to deal with. Other issues? For real, other issues? And so I just wanted to finish up what we were saying before, because I don't believe that I made the connection with what we know is so-called Salafism or Wahhabism to the British. And so what you're getting right now, even if you don't claim to be in none of those groups, 9 times out of 10, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, 9 times out of 10, I go to your bookshelf. If you go to my bookshelf, but see, I know, right? You're going to see some books. And it's going to have those beliefs in it. And if you're honest, you believe what's in those books. Some of these beliefs that are in these books takes you outside of Islam. So you come into Islam only to go out of Islam through the back door. But it's no big deal. You can't come in here. I'm just messing with you. Assalamu alaikum. So I just wanted to make that connection. And all of this, again, like, don't think that's the connection there with white supremacy. Wahhabism, Wahhabism, or so-called Salafism rebranded is a form of, is the white supremacist version of Islam. If you're not part of the solution to stop the disease, default wives, then you're part of the problem. Exactly. Exactly. Saudi moon sign. I mean, this thing goes, it's so many different layers to these things. I mean, even, subhanAllah, we don't realize how deep it is. Like, oh my God. You just mentioned the moon sighting issue. And people think, oh, it's just argumentation and all that. Your fast of Ramadan is not valid unless you fast in Ramadan, right? So You might say, duh. All right. If you follow Saudi moon sighting, you're not fasting in Ramadan. They always start a day early, even for the Saudis, much less those of us who are outside of Saudi Arabia. That's the fourth pillar of Islam. That's just one issue. The Aqidah issue is more important, but that's just one issue. And there's a whole bunch of other issues. I just give you another one off the top of my head. The one iddah, the one men's iddah for a talaq or kula that they do. It's a hadith, Aki. Read the whole hadith. Read the comment again. This is isnad less Islam. I think I'm gonna coin that word. Isnad less Islam. Islam that don't have no isnad, right? They didn't act upon that hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said that for a specific situation, at a specific time. This wasn't something that the Sahaba acted on universally. It wasn't an am. It wasn't a general hadith that just everyone acted on. You read any book of fiqh, they tell you that the woman, the regular iddah for a woman, the waiting period for iddah, that is divorce, regardless if it's a qullah, the woman initiates the divorce, or it's a talaq, is 3 qur, is 3 menstrual cycles. The iddah for a woman that's divorced while she's pregnant is when she gives birth to the baby. Whether it's 9 months or 10 minutes, right? The iddah for a woman whose husband had died is 4 months and 10 days, lunar months. Nowhere one meant, but when you have this isnad list Islam, you can take a hadith and apply it and make it mean whatever you want, regardless of how the Sahaba or the scholars during the time period of the real Salaf acted upon it or understood it. So now you have an Islamic justification to be ratchet. And this is what we've seen happen. You've seen sisters who are married to a brother. And they say, okay, well, I'm going to get a divorce. So they get the divorce, or they do a khullah, because they have this understanding that if you have the khullah, that the iddah is 1 month. So, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So the iddah happens, so the divorce happens. Okay, so the divorce happens, and she says, well, my iddah is only 1 month. So she gets divorced on Wednesday. Her mens comes on Friday. Let's say it lasts a week. Friday, she's off her mens. The next Friday after that. Saturday, she's married to someone else. We've seen this happen. She was pregnant. She didn't know it. She was pregnant. She didn't know it. Who's the father of that baby? Don't know. We've seen this stuff happen. Many women have menses after they're pregnant, especially the first month. That's common. And then on top of this, you have people playing games with the dowry. The mahar. I'm not going to give you no dowry. We defer it. We wait till later. I'll give you the Noble Quran and Sahih Bukhari as your mahar, your dowry, right? But I can't afford that right now, so I'll defer it, right? That may actually be a good thing, because you don't read the deviation that we just quoted in there, right? Right. So they do the khula. The woman initiates the divorce. Part of that is a ransom. The woman gives some money or an agreed upon amount to get out of the marriage. And so they say, hey, being that you got the khula and I didn't give you your dowry yet anyway, We'll just call it even. It says you have to give me something back, but I didn't give you your dowry. And so you have an explosion of marriages and divorces like this going on. No dowry, no waiting period, no nothing. This Islamic ratchetness. Where did it start? This corrupt white supremacist make-believe Aqidah that don't go back to the Salaf. What time we making it? All right. Well, I'm waiting on me. Well, I need to go, inshallah. So we just need to. We just wanted to finish up and mentioning that for us. So we have to go back to the basics. And even if this is you've been going in the wrong direction all of this time. Now it's time for you to pull over and relearn. You don't never stop learning anyway. Just learn from the proper sources. So we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of us and bless all of us, and that we first and foremost have the proper creed, the proper belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why a lot of us are scared, because in our subconscious, Allah is a human being. Allah is a human being in our subconscious because of our corrupt Aqidah. And so when you scared of a creation, you be scared of anything. You scared of man, you be scared of anything. You scared of Allah, you ain't scared of nobody. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.